GianCarlo Canaparo joins me now, who's a legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. GianCarlo, I hope you don't take that too personally, that I think that lawyers are a necessary evil and we have too many laws in this country.
Well, Lars, I am a lawyer, and I think you better lawyer up.
I should lawyer up? Are you going to take me to court for defamation of the entire legal profession? GianCarlo Canaparo.
That's right.
Well, so is there a way of expressing just how complicated our legal system has become only at the federal level before we even start on state and local levels?
Sure. So the truth of the matter is nobody knows how many federal criminal laws are out there. There are somewhere north of 300,000, and that's the best we can do. And when you remember, everybody knows ignorance of the law is no mistake, right? But
right.
When there are 300,000+ laws out there, how can you possibly know what the law expects of you?
Even going to law school wouldn't. I mean, do they make you memorize all 300,000 before you pass the bar and start practicing?
No, they certainly don't.
So let me ask you this. I mean, this almost sounds like we're living up to what Beria, the guy in Russia, said. Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. With 300,000 crimes that is on the books, he could find a crime for just about anybody out there anywhere.
You're absolutely right. And actually, one law professor did a study some years ago and found that the average American violates 3 federal crimes every day without ever knowing about it. And let me give you some examples about what these cover. They cover things like if you're walking your dog through a national park and your dog barks and scares wildlife, that's a crime that you can land in federal prison for up to 6 months for. If you go hunting for arrowheads on nationally protected land, even if you don't find it, you can be jailed for attempt to violate a statute that makes it a crime to take arrowheads from national parks. The list goes on and on, all these things that we have no idea are crimes, that no one would reasonably think are crimes. And this means that if some prosecutor decides that he doesn't like you or that you're a political enemy of his, he can send you to jail just by spending some time poring through the books to find some crime that fits something you've done, and he will find it.
I'm talking to GianCarlo Canaparo, who's a legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Okay, now let's divide these up. 4,500 of these crimes were written into statutes. That took an act of Congress. The other 300,000 are, for the most part, in federal regulations, which means they were written by bureaucrats that none of us have ever heard of, and they are not answerable to the public. They don't show up on the ballot at election time.
That's correct. In fact, even Congress, in its institutional knowledge, doesn't know all the crimes that are out there. In fact, the federal government, the Department of Justice, they've tried to count all of these crimes. Nobody can. Nobody has been able to do it.
So let me ask you this. Is there a way to start chipping away at this number? In fact, you know what I'd love to see? A statute, I'll add one more, that would say every federal agency is going to have every one of its regulations sunset. And maybe make the sunset out there a few years, but say we're going to take it, and then the agency must come in and show Congress why it's absolutely essential to keep that rule. Otherwise, it goes away on its own. Because if we wait for either the agency or the Congress to come up with a list and say, okay, out of the 300,000, here's a dozen we can get rid of, we're going to be waiting for a long, long time. But if we tell them they're all going away unless you tell us why you absolutely really need to have this regulation that makes something a crime on the books, and if you don't give us a good answer, it's going away.
Lars, you might have a career in Congress with that kind of good judgment.
No, that's another job I don't want. Lawyer and member of Congress, but even still.
You and me both. Well, there is a bill out there right now that would do almost everything that you said. There's a representative in Texas by the name of Chip Roy, and he introduced a bill called the Count the Crimes to Cut Act. It's a mouthful, but what it does is it says the federal government, the Department of Justice, has to count up all the crimes that are in the U.S. Code, and every agency out there in Washington that has criminal regulations has to count them and gather them all up and report them to Congress so that Congress can go through them and look at them and say, should these still be crimes? Are we over-punishing for ridiculous behavior like dogs barking in national parks? Can we cut this? And let's get some oversight in there so that we make sure we don't have criminal laws running amok like we do right now.
And could we even, look, I understand probably why the dog's barking law was put on the books, but I don't think it should be a crime. But could you do sort of a catch-all where you say park rangers, my dad used to be a national park ranger, park rangers have the latitude to cite somebody and say, you've violated the law. There are some of those sort of catch-alls at the city level and the state level called disorderly conduct. And they don't sit and list every one of the things you could do that constitute, because people are imaginative. They come up with new ways all the time to engage in disorderly conduct or malicious mischief and say that's the catch-all. So if you're saying, well, what do we do when we have somebody show up at a national park? He's got a dog. He puts the dog off leash and says, sick him, and sends the dog after a herd of elk or some sheep or something. And you say, no, you can't do that. Well, is there a law against it? Yep. It's called malicious mischief. And we're, or something like that. And then that park ranger or hands it off to a prosecutor who can say this is stupid and throws it out, or to a judge who says, no, that's not a crime. Drinking through a straw on national park land or whatever other stupid rule is in there. But we'll give them enough latitude that when somebody's actually creating a problem, then it becomes incumbent on the agency, the park, national parks, or the judge or the federal prosecutor to say, this really is a problem, Your Honor. We need to punish this person for doing it.
Well, the problem with that approach is that it gives law enforcement total discretion. So it doesn't solve the problem of a bad actor, say a ranger who just really has it out for you, or a law enforcement officer who just decides he's going to get you with something. It doesn't stop that problem. So I'll give you another example. In a lot of states, it's illegal to shovel snow for other people in exchange for payment unless you are licensed.
I did that when I was a kid. That was illegal. I was committing federal crimes before I got to the age of 10.
Well, state-level crimes. But there was a little boy in Illinois who shoveled his grandmother's driveway for $5, and the police came and shut him down and told him that if he did it again, they were going to cite him for a misdemeanor. That's not just. I mean, nobody in their right mind thinks that that's just. Any decent law enforcement agency, any decent government, local, state bureaucrat there who oversaw that licensing scheme should have said, no way. But you know what? They did anyway. They went ahead with this anyway, and they didn't stop until the press got involved and raised a fuss. But think about how many other people their stories don't get to the press. You don't have that oversight. And so the only thing stopping them from suffering the same is the benevolence of a particular bureaucrat.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a case like that, I would hope that the officer's sergeant or his lieutenant or a captain or the chief would look at this, or the city council would say, hold on a second. If we're out citing kids for shoveling snow, we need to get a new police chief who's not going to let that kind of thing happen because he knows that it's crazy. GianCarlo, thanks very much for the time. He's a legal fellow at Heritage, and we always appreciate his insights. How about getting rid of some of those 300,000 federal crimes on the books?